Hi there, my name is Floyd, and welcome to our True Crime channel. Today, we're diving into a twisted story of forbidden love, dark family secrets, and a tragedy that left a family shattered. This is the story of blood ties, broken hearts, so stay with me as we uncover the truth behind this chilling case. This is the story of a family torn apart by lies, manipulation, and a forbidden love. Step-siblings Naomi and Elias were thrust together by their parents' marriage, but what started as an uncomfortable living arrangement led to an affair that would unravel dark secrets hidden at the heart of their family, secrets that would leave blood on their hands. On June 15, 2022, at 8:30 p.m., 18-year-old Naomi Clark arrived home to find her stepbrother, Elias Montgomery, sitting in the living room, a half-empty glass of whiskey in hand. The house was quiet, but something felt different. The air between them was thick with tension. Naomi had noticed the change in Elias recently, but tonight it was undeniable. What she didn't know was that the unraveling of their family was just beginning, and soon, their quiet neighborhood in Davenport, Iowa would never be the same. Naomi had always been the quiet one, an introspective high school senior with a passion for art and a plan to leave for college soon. Her life had been predictable until a year ago, when her mother, Anna Clark, announced she was marrying David Montgomery, a wealthy entrepreneur. That marriage brought Elias into her life. At 20, Elias was everything Naomi wasn't: outgoing, charismatic, and unafraid to take risks. He had dropped out of college to pursue business ventures, always balancing on the edge of legality. From the start, Naomi kept her distance, but the forced proximity in their shared home created a tension neither could ignore. As time passed, Naomi's feelings shifted from discomfort to something far more complicated. Elias, who usually carried an air of self-assurance, seemed unusually withdrawn that night. Naomi felt it the moment she walked in. He wasn't his typical confident self. The usual teasing smile was gone, replaced by an unsettling silence. As Naomi closed the door behind her, a chill ran down her spine. She knew something had changed. But that evening, Naomi could never have imagined that Elias was hiding a truth that would tear their family apart. A truth that was deeply tied to their parents' sudden and mysterious marriage, and would soon expose a plot far darker than she ever expected. Naomi Clark had always lived a structured and predictable life. Raised by her single mother, Anna Clark, Naomi had found comfort in routine and focused on her studies. She was a talented artist and preferred to keep to herself. That all changed the day her mother announced she was marrying David Montgomery, a wealthy and successful entrepreneur. For Naomi, this marriage felt like an unwelcome disruption. Naomi had never fully trusted David, but it wasn't him that bothered her most. It was his son, Elias Montgomery. Naomi resented the idea of living with Elias, who was David's only child from a previous marriage. Their personalities couldn't have been more different. Where Naomi was quiet and reserved, Elias was bold and rebellious. He skipped college and threw himself into risky business ventures that often flirted with the edge of legality. He thrived on danger, something Naomi couldn't understand. But beneath his confidence, Elias carried a weight Naomi didn't initially see. For most of her life, Naomi had avoided conflict. She preferred to keep the peace, especially now that their blended family had formed. But as time passed, something began to change. She found herself drawn to Elias in a way she couldn't explain. She fought hard to suppress those feelings, knowing they were wrong. Yet the more she tried to distance herself from him, the closer they became. Elias Montgomery, on the other hand, had lived most of his life under the shadow of his father. David Montgomery was a demanding man who expected perfection from Elias at all times. Their relationship had always been strained. Elias was never the son his father wanted him to be. David demanded compliance while Elias wanted to forge his own path. This constant tension drove Elias to act out, taking risks and building his life outside of his father's expectations. Beneath his rebellious nature, though, was a deeper vulnerability, a desire for acceptance and understanding that his father never gave him. Over the course of the year following their parents' marriage, Naomi and Elias grew closer. What started as a tense, uncomfortable living situation developed into something neither could control. Their bond crossed a line on New Year's Eve, 2022, during a party their parents had thrown to celebrate their new union. Naomi and Elias found themselves alone in the chaos of the celebration, sharing a moment that changed everything. That night marked the beginning of their secret affair. Naomi was consumed with guilt, but couldn't deny her feelings for Elias. Despite her better judgment, she allowed the relationship to continue. But with their growing closeness came growing suspicions. Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that Elias was hiding something. There were moments of strange tension between her mother and David, and Elias always seemed to know more than he let on. The closer Naomi got to Elias, the more aware she became of inconsistencies, whispers of something far deeper than the typical issues in a marriage. Naomi's suspicions grew, but she couldn't bring herself to confront the truth. Elias, on the other hand, was becoming more secretive, and the tension between him and his father escalated. Naomi was caught in the middle, trying to balance her feelings for Elias with the dark undercurrents she sensed in their home. What had started as a forbidden romance was now pulling her deeper into a web of deception that was about to unravel in ways she couldn't imagine. Naomi's relationship with Elias was becoming more difficult to hide, but as their connection deepened, so did her sense of unease. By February 2023, Naomi couldn't ignore the growing tension in her house. She had started to see signs that something wasn't right, not just between her and Elias, but with her mother and David as well. There were too many strange moments to ignore. The late-night phone calls, the way her mother seemed more withdrawn lately, and David's unpredictable temper. What Naomi didn't realize was that Elias had been keeping secrets of his own. Naomi had always been close with her mother, Anna, but over the past few months, Anna seemed distant and distracted. At first, Naomi thought it was just the pressure of being in a new marriage, but it wasn't just that. Naomi had overheard arguments between Anna and David, muffled voices late at night that stopped the moment she got close. Her mother never mentioned them in the morning, acting as if everything was fine. Still, Naomi sensed a growing fear in her mother's eyes, a silent cry for help that no one else seemed to notice. The more Naomi watched her mother and David, the more uncomfortable she became. David's behavior was erratic, his temper flaring up over small things. He would lash out at Anna over trivial matters, and the tension in the house became suffocating. David's controlling nature had always been obvious to Naomi, but now it was taking on a more sinister tone. She saw how he monitored Anna's every move, how he criticized her for the smallest mistakes. It wasn't just a strained marriage, it was something darker. At the same time, Naomi found herself in an impossible position. Her love for Elias was undeniable, but she was beginning to realize that Elias was part of the problem. Elias knew more than he let on. Whenever Naomi pressed him about their parents' marriage, he brushed her off, telling her not to worry. But Naomi could sense he was hiding something big. There were too many things that didn't add up. One night in March 2023, Naomi confronted Elias after overhearing a particularly heated argument between David and Anna. She demanded answers. What Elias told her that night shook her to her core. Elias admitted that David's marriage to Anna wasn't the fairy tale romance it appeared to be. According to Elias, David had orchestrated the union for financial reasons. It was part of a calculated plan to secure control over both families' assets. David's wealth wasn't as stable as he had led people to believe. He had been involved in risky business deals that had gone bad, and marrying Anna was his way of merging their finances to cover his tracks. Elias revealed that he had known about the plan all along, but had felt powerless to stop it. Naomi was stunned. She had always suspected David wasn't trustworthy, but to hear that her mother had been manipulated into the marriage was devastating. Her mind raced with questions. Had her mother known, or was she, too, a pawn in David's scheme? Naomi's heart broke as she realized the extent of the deception. But what troubled Naomi most was Elias's role in all of this. He had known the truth, yet he hadn't told her. Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that Elias was protecting his father, that despite his hatred for David, he was still loyal to him in some way. The bond they shared, the forbidden love they had kept secret, suddenly felt tainted by the lies surrounding them. As the weeks went on, the tension in the house became unbearable. Naomi tried to distance herself from Elias, but their attraction was too strong. Every time she thought about ending things, something pulled her back. She couldn't help but wonder if Elias was telling her everything. Was he really a victim in his father's scheme, or was he more involved than he was letting on? In April 2023, Naomi's suspicions reached a breaking point when she discovered something disturbing. Late one night, she overheard Elias on the phone with someone, his voice low and urgent. She couldn't make out the details, but it was clear he was discussing their parents. Naomi's heart raced as she realized Elias was hiding more than she thought. Who was he talking to? And what was he planning? Naomi began to dig deeper. She started going through Elias's things when he wasn't home, desperate to find out the truth. One afternoon, she found a hidden folder on his computer that contained financial records, documents that linked Elias to David's business dealings. It was worse than she imagined. Elias hadn't just been aware of his father's schemes, he had been actively helping him cover them up. Naomi was devastated. The man she loved had betrayed her in the worst way possible, but even worse, she realized that their entire relationship had been built on lies. Was Elias using her, just as his father had used her mother? Naomi didn't know what to believe anymore. All she knew was that the man she had trusted was deeply involved in a dangerous conspiracy, and she was now caught in the middle of it. Naomi didn't confront Elias right away. She needed time to process what she had found, but she knew she couldn't keep it inside much longer. The secrets were eating away at her, and she feared for her mother's safety. David's temper was getting worse, and Anna was growing more withdrawn by the day. Naomi couldn't sit back and watch as her mother was destroyed by a man who had manipulated her into a loveless marriage. But she also didn't know how to stop it. By May 2023, Naomi had become a prisoner in her own home. The love she had once shared with Elias had turned into a burden, a constant reminder of the lies that surrounded her. She couldn't look at him the same way anymore, knowing what he had done. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to end things either. Their connection was too strong, even if it was built on deception. As summer approached, the tension in the house reached its peak. Naomi's relationship with her mother had grown strained, as Anna seemed to sense that something was wrong, but couldn't quite figure out what. David, meanwhile, had become more aggressive, lashing out at Anna over the smallest things. Naomi knew it was only a matter of time before something terrible happened. In early June 2023, Naomi made a decision. She couldn't live like this any longer. She had to confront Elias and demand the truth about their parents, about his involvement in David's schemes, and about their future. She couldn't continue living in a house built on lies, not when her mother's safety was at risk. On June 15, 2023, Naomi confronted Elias for the second time. This time, there were no half-truths or evasions. She demanded to know everything, every secret, every lie. What Elias told her that night would set off a chain of events that would lead to a tragedy no one could have predicted. On the night of June 15th, 2023, Naomi couldn't wait any longer. The weight of what she had discovered, the lies, the betrayal, the fear for her mother's safety, pushed her to confront Elias once more. She found him sitting in the living room, that same unsettling silence hanging between them. But this time, Naomi wasn't going to be pushed aside. "Tell me everything, Elias. No more lies. I know about the business, about the money. I know about the deal with my mother's assets. How long have you been involved?" Her voice trembled, but she didn't back down. Elias was silent for a moment, staring at the floor. He could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on him, knowing there was no way to avoid it now. With a sigh, he finally looked up at Naomi. "I never wanted to involve you," Elias said quietly. "I didn't have a choice. My father, he's been planning this for years. Marrying your mom was his way out. He needed her money to cover his tracks, to hide his bad investments." Naomi's heart sank. The confirmation of her worst fears left her numb, but Elias wasn't done. "I didn't know the full extent at first," he continued. "But once I found out, it was too late. He threatened to cut me off, to ruin me, if I didn't help him. I had no choice, Naomi. I'm trapped, just like you. But I swear, I never wanted this to happen." Naomi wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the man she had fallen in love with wasn't complicit in her family's destruction. But it wasn't enough. She needed to protect her mother. What about my mom? Naomi's voice was barely a whisper. Does she know? Elias shook his head. No, she doesn't know anything. She thinks this marriage was real, that it was for love. But it's all a lie. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. Naomi's mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. Her mother had been manipulated, just like her. And now, their lives were entangled in a web of deception that felt impossible to escape. Naomi stood up, pacing the room as Elias watched her, helpless. We have to stop this, Naomi said, her voice stronger now. We can't let him keep doing this. He's going to destroy my mother if we don't do something. Elias hesitated. Naomi, it's not that simple. My father, he's dangerous. He won't just let us walk away. I don't care, Naomi snapped, turning to face him. I won't let him hurt her any more than he already has. We have to stop him. But before they could discuss it further, the sound of a door slamming echoed through the house. Naomi and Elias froze, their eyes wide with fear. David Montgomery had returned home. The tension in the house had already been unbearable, but now, with David there, it felt suffocating. Naomi could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she exchanged a glance with Elias. They knew this confrontation was inevitable. David walked into the room, his presence commanding and intimidating. He took one look at Naomi and Elias, and something dark flickered in his eyes. He could sense that something had changed, that his carefully laid plans were starting to unravel. What's going on here? David's voice was cold, his gaze shifting between them. Elias stood up, trying to compose himself. We need to talk, Dad. David crossed his arms, raising an eyebrow. About what? Naomi, feeling the surge of anger and fear that had been building for months, stepped forward. We know what you've been doing, David. The lies, the manipulation. You've been using my mother for her money. You've been using all of us. David's face hardened, his expression unreadable. For a moment he said nothing, but the tension in the room grew unbearable. Is that what you think? David finally spoke, his voice icy. That I've been using you? You don't know anything, girl. This marriage, this life I've built, it's all for you. For us. Naomi's anger flared. For us? You've been tearing us apart. You've manipulated my mother, turned Elias into your puppet, and for what? So you can cover your tracks? This isn't about family, this is about your greed. David's eyes flashed with fury. Watch your mouth, Naomi. You don't know what you're talking about. Elias stepped forward, standing between Naomi and his father. Dad, stop. She's right. This has gone too far. We can't keep living like this. It's over. David stared at his son, disbelief etched across his face. You're turning on me now? After everything I've done for you? Elias's voice was firm, though his hands trembled. I'm not doing this anymore, Dad. We're done. David's anger boiled over. He stepped toward Elias, his voice low and dangerous. You ungrateful little... But before he could finish, Anna Clark entered the room, her face pale and stricken. She had overheard everything. David, what is this? Anna's voice was trembling as she looked at her husband. What are they talking about? David turned to Anna, his demeanor changing in an instant. Anna, sweetheart, don't listen to them. They don't understand. Everything I've done, it's been for us. But Anna shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. No, David. I've known something was wrong for months. I just didn't want to believe it. Naomi moved to her mother's side, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Mom, it's true. David's been using you. He's been lying to you from the beginning. David's face twisted with anger. You don't get to decide what's true, Naomi. You don't know anything about how this world works. The room was charged with tension, and for a moment everything seemed to hang in the balance. And then it happened. David lunged at Elias, his rage blinding him. The two men struggled, knocking over furniture in their fight. Naomi screamed, trying to pull them apart, but it was too late. In the chaos, David lost his footing and fell, hitting his head hard on the corner of a table. The room fell silent. David lay on the floor, unconscious and bleeding. The house was filled with a deafening silence after the chaos. David Montgomery lay motionless, his blood pooling around him. Naomi stood frozen, unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation. Elias, still standing over his father's body, whispered under his breath, "It wasn't supposed to end like this." But it had. David was dead, and there was no undoing what had happened. Within the hour, the police were at the Montgomery house. The call had come from Anna, who had finally regained enough composure to dial 911. By 2:30 a.m., the house was swarming with officers, paramedics, and detectives. Detective Laura Dempsey of the Davenport Police Department arrived at the scene to lead the investigation. Known for her sharp intuition, Dempsey immediately sensed that there was more to this case than a simple accident. As the paramedics pronounced David Montgomery dead at the scene, Detective Dempsey turned her attention to Naomi, Elias, and Anna. Their stories were consistent. A heated argument had escalated, and in the chaos, David had fallen and struck his head. But the unease in their faces told Dempsey that the truth might be far more complicated. Naomi, who had been silent for most of the night, finally spoke when Detective Dempsey sat her down for questioning. Her hands trembled as she recounted the events of the evening. "We didn't mean for any of this to happen," Naomi said, her voice breaking. "We were just trying to protect my mom." Dempsey's eyes narrowed. "Protect her from what, Naomi?" Naomi hesitated, glancing at Elias, who was sitting in another room, his hands still stained with his father's blood. She wasn't sure how much to say. She knew that if the truth about David's schemes came out, it would destroy everything. But there was no way to keep it hidden now. Naomi took a deep breath and began to explain. She told Detective Dempsey about David's manipulation, how he had married her mother for financial gain, how Elias had been forced to help cover up his father's fraudulent business dealings, and how Naomi had discovered the truth only a few months earlier. Dempsey listened carefully, making notes as Naomi spoke. "He was using my mother," Naomi said quietly. "All of this, everything he did, it was to save his own skin. He didn't care about us. He never did." Dempsey nodded slowly, her mind racing as she pieced together the puzzle. It was clear that this family had been living under the weight of secrets for a long time, but one thing still didn't add up. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Dempsey asked, her tone more serious now. "Why not tell the police when you first found out?" Naomi looked down, her eyes filling with tears. "Because we didn't know how. We were scared. We thought we could fix it ourselves, but it all spiraled out of control." Meanwhile, in the next room, Elias was being questioned by another officer. His demeanor was different, calmer, but no less shaken. He admitted to knowing about his father's illegal activities, but claimed that he had been trapped. "He threatened me," Elias said. "He told me that if I didn't help him, he'd destroy me. I didn't have a choice." Detective Dempsey took note of Elias's claim, but remained skeptical. She knew how people like David Montgomery operated. It was all about control, and it seemed like David had been controlling his family from the very start. As the sun began to rise over Davenport, the investigation continued. Forensics teams scoured the house for evidence, while Detective Dempsey and her team tried to untangle the web of lies and deceit that had led to David's death. The house, once a symbol of wealth and success, was now a crime scene. Naomi sat on the front steps, watching the police go in and out of the house, their radios crackling with updates. Her heart felt heavy with guilt and confusion. She hadn't meant for any of this to happen. None of them had. But now, they were trapped in a situation they couldn't escape from. Detective Dempsey approached Naomi once more. "Naomi," she said gently, "I believe you didn't want this, but we need to know everything. About David, about the business, and about what really happened last night." Naomi looked up at her, the weight of the truth pressing down on her chest. She knew what had to come next. There was no turning back now. The truth would have to come out, no matter how painful it was. In the days that followed, the truth about David Montgomery's secret life came to light. Investigators uncovered a trail of financial crimes, fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering that stretched back years. David had used his marriage to Anna Clark as a way to merge their assets, covering his tracks and protecting himself from financial ruin. Elias, once thought to be complicit, was revealed to have been a reluctant participant, manipulated by his father's threats. As the case progressed, Elias was charged with involuntary manslaughter. His lawyer argued that David's death had been an accident, the result of a physical altercation that spiraled out of control. The court heard about David's manipulation and the psychological toll it had taken on his family. In the end, Elias was sentenced to 5 years in prison, though many believed his punishment was too lenient. For Naomi and her mother, the aftermath was filled with grief and disbelief. The man they had trusted had betrayed them in the worst way. The family's secrets were laid bare, and while justice had been served, the emotional scars would remain for years to come. Naomi knew life would never be the same. The truth had been revealed, but the pain lingered. The aftermath of the Montgomery case rippled through the quiet town of Davenport. Neighbors, friends, and the public were left in shock as the full extent of David's crimes and the family's entanglement were exposed. The media dubbed it the Montgomery Scandal, and the story captivated the nation. People couldn't believe how a family could be manipulated so deeply, nor could they ignore the tragic consequences of greed and deception. For Naomi Clark, the impact was far more personal. The affair with Elias, the lies, and the eventual loss of both her stepfather and her stepbrother left emotional scars that would never fully heal. Naomi and her mother Anna tried to rebuild their lives, but the weight of what had happened was always there, lingering like a shadow. The community rallied around them, offering support, but the sense of betrayal ran deep. As time passed, the case faded from headlines, but for those involved, the pain remained. Naomi and Anna would forever be marked by the tragedy that had unfolded in their home. It was a stark reminder that even the closest families can be destroyed by secrets. In the end, the Montgomery family was left broken, its heart shattered beyond repair. And that's the story of blood ties, broken hearts, a family torn apart by lies, manipulation, and a forbidden love that led to tragedy. What do you think? Was justice truly served in this case, or did Elias deserve a harsher punishment? And could Naomi have done something to stop the unraveling sooner? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more true crime stories just like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.